Okay, so picture this. A state way back before anything like modern tech, right? They're fighting with bronze swords, maybe some iron ones, basic stuff.
Uh-huh. Standard ancient warfare setup.
But somehow, they're recording kills. Like hundreds of thousands of people in single campaigns.
Yeah, it's staggering when you first encounter those figures.
We're not talking estimates here, are we? This is like official counts based on, well, severed heads.
Exactly. That's the official metric. Heads delivered, heads counted. It sounds, frankly, like a horrifying paradox.
Right. So is this just some kind of, I don't know, history's most gruesome accounting scam? Or was there something else going on?
Well, that's what's so fascinating. When you dig into the Qin State during the Warring States period, these numbers, like you said, over 100,000 casualties sometimes, they seem totally unbelievable.
So that's the puzzle we're diving into. Because the terrifying thing is, it probably wasn't a scam. Qin's edge, it wasn't better swords or shields.
Nope. No secret weapon in the traditional sense. Their quote-unquote super weapon was something different. It was this radical social engineering system.
A meritocracy, but like a really ruthless, hyper-focused one.
Ruthless is the word, designed pretty much purely for conquest. We need to look beyond the battlefield tactics, into the actual structure of their society, the bureaucracy behind the killing.
Okay, so the scale of this annihilation of their rivals, it suggests they weren't just fighting wars like everyone else.
Exactly. It's like they created this this war machine that ran on really clear transactional incentives. We're basically looking at murder as a state-sponsored career path, performance-based killing.
A job description from hell.
Grandma.
Okay, let's start with those numbers then. The sheer size of them, just jumping off the pages of the historical records. It's not just occasional big battles, it's consistent. Tens of thousands, often hundreds of thousands claimed slain.
And the language used is chilling, too. You mentioned the heads, but there's also this term kung sha.
Right, kung sha. What exactly does that mean? It sounds bad.
It is. It translates roughly to burying captives alive, usually en masse, systematically executing prisoners, maybe even civilians, after a big victory.
Burying them alive, hundreds of thousands. I mean, skepticism seems like the only rational response, right?
Absolutely. Even from a purely practical standpoint, how do you track that? How do you physically do that with just melee weapons? It seems logistically, well, nightmarish.
Impossible, almost. For any ancient state to manage that kind of operation, let alone the bookkeeping, you'd think the numbers must be inflated propaganda?
You would think so. But here's the really disturbing part. Scholars, centuries later, looking back at Qin's own records, they felt the same skepticism. But when they actually started adding things up, the horror just gets worse.
So people inside China, later on, were also shocked by these figures.
Yeah. This isn't just us modern folks looking back. Ancient and imperial Chinese scholars were taken aback too, but they were diligent. They went back, they tallied the recorded victories claimed by Qin, and the numbers, well, they seem to confirm this unprecedented scale of killing.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah.
Who actually did this kind of gruesome historical audit?
Well, one key figure is Wang Yinglin. He was a scholar official writing much later, during the Song and Yuan dynasties, so centuries removed.
Okay.
And he undertook this massive task. He decided to calculate the cumulative number of beheadings officially recorded in the histories, starting from a specific battle, the Battle of Shamun, all the way up to just before Qin finally unified all the states.
And I'm guessing the total wasn't small.
Not even close. Wang Yinglin's calculation, his minimum cumulative tally based on the records, it exceeded 1.4 million recorded enemy deaths.
Wait, 1.4 million?
1.4 million recorded beheadings, achieved mostly with swords, spears, arrows, and that's before Qin even finished the job of unification.
That's almost incomprehensible. 1.4 million. It's like a World War I body count, but delivered by hand.
Okay, was he the only one who tried to check this? No, not at all. Fast forward a few more centuries to the Qing Dynasty. Another historian, Liang Yusheng, did a similar audit, very meticulous, focusing just on the specific figures mentioned in the primary historical record, the Shiji.
And his total?
His tally, based purely on those explicit mentions, came out even slightly higher, 1.668 million enemy deaths.
Wow. So, okay, we've got two different scholars, centuries apart, both running the numbers on the official records and both coming up with figures well over 1.4 million.
Exactly. And their conclusion, despite acknowledging there might be gaps or some exaggeration in specific cases, was basically, the scale of killing attributed to the Qin armies was just fundamentally different, unprecedented among the warring states.
So it seems we have to accept the scale, at least broadly, which forces the question, why? Why Qin? Why could they inflict and, crucially, track these kinds of mass casualties? Their neighbors, Wei, Zhao, Tu, they had similar weapons, right?
Pretty much, yeah. The tech wasn't the differentiator. The answer, it seems, lies in how Qin fundamentally restructured its entire society. And this is where the figure of Shenyang becomes absolutely central.
The great reformer.
The great and utterly ruthless reformer. His changes were foundational. He essentially boiled down the entire purpose of the Qin State, like its reason for existing, into just two things.
Which were?
Gongzhan. Farming and warfare.
Farming and warfare. Simple.
Deceptively simple. Shenyang's whole philosophy was, farming exists only to feed the army. The army exists only to expand the state's territory through war. Everything else. Philosophy, trade, art, even the traditional power of the old aristocracy. It was all secondary, or just eliminated.
So it created this single, incredibly powerful incentive structure. If you were a regular guy in Qin, you couldn't really climb the ladder through birthright anymore, or by being a clever merchant.
Nope. If you wanted real power, serious land, the highest aristocratic ranks, there was basically only one reliable path. You had to kill the state's enemies.
A meritocracy of murder.
That's exactly what it was. And the absolute linchpin, the mechanism that made this philosophy brutally operational, was the reward system. It was structured like a peace rate commission.
Based on heads.
Based literally on severed heads. Your military merit, your rank, your rewards, calculated per head delivered.
So the head wasn't just like a grisly souvenir to prove you were brave.
Oh, no, it was the receipt. It was the physical proof, the auditable unit required to unlock the state's most valuable rewards: land, titles, exemptions, political power.
And that auditing part is key, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. Think about it from the state's perspective. This system forced them to audit. No physical head presented. No pass on the audit. Which meant no promotion, no reward, no land grant. The state had to count these heads accurately, rigorously, because their entire system for distributing wealth and status depended on these verifiable kills.
It's perverse, but that transactional nature, that's what makes those huge numbers seem horribly credible. They weren't just bragging, they were accounting.
Precisely. And this brings us back to that initial skepticism. How could they possibly rack up tens of thousands of kills so often? There's a theory about that from a later scholar.
Okay.
A scholar named Chao Zhou from the later Shuhan period. He looked at these huge, consistent numbers, how reports often seem to start at 10,000 beheadings after a victory, and he speculated...
So speculated what? That it wasn't all soldiers.
Exactly. Chao Zhou's theory was basically that maybe, just maybe, Qin armies didn't stop the killing when the enemy army broke or surrendered.
They kept going. Against who?
To hit the quotas, to maximize their personal rewards and achieve those high ranks with the big land payouts. Chao Zhou suggested they might have systematically slaughtered non-combatants, the elderly, women, children, anyone found in the conquered area after the battle was over.
Oh my God. So the civilians became just more units of currency.
Basically, yes. The cheapest, easiest way to inflate the headcount and satisfy the state's brutal commission structure. It transforms the whole idea of conquest. It's not just about political control anymore.
It's literally a business transaction. The soldier isn't seeing an enemy soldier from Zhao. They're seeing a walking promotion. A commodity.
A means to an end. And that dehumanization, reducing people to a metric, that's the core insight, I think. That's how Qin operated on a scale its rivals just couldn't fathom. The incentives were personal, immediate, and ruthlessly enforced by law.
What really strikes me is, it's almost ironic, the shocking consistency of these horrifying numbers is maybe the strongest evidence that the system was working, just like Shenyang designed it. If the numbers were all over the place, you'd suspect propaganda, right?
Right. Wild fluctuations might mean they're just making stuff up.
But the cold, relentless repetition of huge numbers, it suggests bureaucratic efficiency, a system humming along.
It wasn't about morale or patriotism, not primarily anyway. It was about hitting performance targets. And the state's dark genius was making sure every single soldier was personally, intensely motivated to deliver the highest possible number.
Okay, so if this piece rate system, this commission per head, was the engine driving the individual soldier, then the verification process, the auditing, that was the crucial machinery keeping it all running. The finance department of the war machine, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. And the amazing thing is we have actual tangible proof of how hyper-rigorous the system was. This isn't just theory.
It's not just inferred from the big numbers.
No, it was literally dug out of the ground. In 1975, archaeologists excavated a Qin Dynasty tomb at a place called Shuihudi, and inside they found stacks and stacks of bamboo slips.
Wooden documents.
Exactly, preserved for millennia. And these weren't, philosophical treatises or epic poems. They were the nuts and bolts of Qin administration. Legal statutes, administrative manual.
The internal memos of the Conquest Corporation.
Pretty much. Specifically a collection called the Fengzhong Shi. It translates roughly as models for sealing and investigation. Basically standard operating procedures for bureaucratic checks and balances.
And these show the head counting system in action.
They absolutely do. They reveal the sheer amount of administrative effort that went into managing this process. It confirms it wasn't just some loose guideline, it was legally codified and enforced. We see this principle, Jin, Ji Jiao, which means something like meticulous verification or scrutinizing every detail being applied in actual legal disputes. Disputes over even a single head.
Before we get into those cases,
Yeah.
let's just quickly recap the stakes. We said ranks and land. What did that actually mean for a soldier?
Right, good point. This is vital context. Shenyang didn't just create a reward system, he created a very specific hierarchy. 20 distinct ranks of aristocratic status.
20 levels.
20 levels. Starting from the bottom, rank 1, the Gong, all the way up to the very top, rank 20, the Sao Tsing, which was basically like being chancellor. And every single step up that ladder came with clearly defined guaranteed rewards.
So it wasn't just a fancy title. It meant actual stuff.
Oh, yeah. Tangible assets. You hit rank X, you get this much land measured out, you get this many household servants or slaves who were themselves exempt from being drafted, and crucially, your family's social status was permanently lifted. You got legal privileges, protection from certain punishments. It was a massive upgrade.
Okay, that puts the intensity into perspective. You're not just fighting for glory or a pat on the back. You're fighting for your family's entire future. Economic security, legal status, everything.
Exactly. Bring back, say, 5 heads, maybe you jump to rank 2. Bring back 50. You might leap several ranks, get a nice plot of land. The state legally guaranteed this payout. So the soldier becomes this rational economic actor, just laser focused on maximizing his kill count.
Okay, now let's hear about those legal cases from Shuihudi.
Oh.
They must be wild. Case 1.
Case 1 is amazing. It reads like you said, an HR dispute from hell. You have 3 soldiers involved. A, B, and C. Soldier A drags Soldier B plus a severed head in front of their commanding officer. A testifies. Okay, Soldier C here. He's the one who actually cut this head off on the battlefield.
Simple enough. C gets the credit.
But wait. A continues. But this guy, Soldier B, I caught him trying to murder Soldier C to steal the head and claim the rank and reward for himself. A says he intervened and captured B, the would-be thief and murderer.
Whoa. Okay, so you're fighting the enemy, and apparently you also have to watch your back against your own comrades trying to steal your commission.
Your literal physical commission. That single head was worth so much land, status, maybe jumping up a rank that fratricide over it was a real risk, something the system had to account for.
And how did the state, the officer, react? Did they just say, battlefield chaos, whatever?
Not at all. That's the key. The officer had to investigate meticulously. Why? Because the state's entire promise rested on this system. If Soldier C, who earned the head, could just have it stolen and the thief rewarded, the whole transactional trust collapses.
The whole incentive system breaks down if the contract isn't honored.
Precisely. They had to ensure the sales contract was fulfilled correctly. It's like extreme corporate integrity applied to the most brutal transaction imaginable.
Okay, what about case 2? You said it gets even more bureaucratic.
Yeah, case 2 involves a dispute between 2 soldiers over who gets credit for, again, a single head. They can't agree, so they bring it to an officer.
The officer has to play judge.
Right. But he doesn't just flip a coin or listen to who shouts loudest. What does he do?
He calls in. Forensics.
Basically, yeah. He assigns a specialist inspector, someone whose job it is to examine the evidence, the head itself.
Quality control.
Exactly. And the inspector files a report, and the report says, essentially, hold on. After examination, this head is suspected to be that of a fallen Qin soldier, not an enemy.
Oh. So friendly fire, or maybe someone trying to cheat the system?
Could be either. But the crucial point is the inspector's conclusion. Therefore, we need further rigorous verification before any rank or reward is given out for this head.
That's a perfect internal audit. The state absolutely cannot afford to accidentally pay out a valuable rank, land grant, maybe generational status, to a soldier who brought in, essentially, contraband, the head of one of their own guys.
Right. The integrity of that audit protects the state's treasury, the land and titles they control. It ensures they're only paying for genuine sales.
So the auditing system, it wasn't just red tape. It was fundamental to making the whole thing work.
It was an investment in future killing, really. By being incredibly strict, the state proved to all its soldiers, all its salesmen, that the system was fair and reliable. If you do the work, kill the enemy, bring the proof. You will get paid. Guaranteed by law.
Which just reinforces the motivation.
Totally. It eliminates the uncertainty. The soldier knew, with legal backing, that their gruesome work would translate directly into concrete rewards.
So, okay, we can really frame the Qin State as this giant, terrifyingly efficient sales corporation focused entirely on market expansion through violence.
And every male citizen is potentially a commission-only sales agent.
And the leadership, the management, their job is to make sure the finance and compliance departments, the officers, the inspectors, enforce the rules strictly. Count every head, verify every claim.
Because every single head represents a payout the state has to make. Land, status, resources, they have a massive self-interest in auditing strictly.
The rigor wasn't there to stop the killing. It was there to make the killing more effective by guaranteeing the reward.
Exactly. Better verification leads to more soldier confidence, which leads to more motivated killing. It's this chilling feedback loop. The state posts the bounty quests, guarantees the payout by law, and the soldiers become this huge motivated guild driven to fulfill those quests.
Not fighting for the king's glory, first and foremost.
But fighting for that land grant. Fighting to lift their family, their kids, out of the peasant grind. It's deeply personal, deeply transactional.
And that focus, guaranteed by this incredibly rigorous bureaucracy. That's why those huge casualty figures start to seem grimly plausible. The numbers were big because they were literally tied to money and status.
Yeah. If you're asking why Qin ultimately conquered everyone else, it wasn't necessarily because they had smarter generals on any given Tuesday. It's because they built this perfectly aligned corporate structure that demanded and rewarded the absolute maximum level of organized violence every single day.
Okay, we've seen the mechanics of this horrifying machine. Now let's look at its most infamous, maybe most shocking result. The Battle of Changping. The numbers here are just off the charts. 400,000 enemy soldiers from the state of Zhao supposedly captured and then executed.
Yeah.
Buried.
Yeah, Changping, that's the figure that has, for centuries, just broken people's historical imagination. You mentioned skepticism earlier. This is where it peaks. The great Southern Song philosopher Zhu Xi, for example, he looked at that 400,000 number and basically said, nope. Impossible.
And you can see why. How could any ancient state, even one as brutal as Qin, possibly have the logistics to execute and dispose of nearly 500,000 men in like one go?
It does seem inconceivable as a single event, and the modern historical consensus tends to lean towards clarifying that number. The 400,000 likely represents the total butcher's bill for the entire Changping campaign.
Ah, so not one giant execution, but the cumulative losses over months of fighting, culminating in this final disaster for Zhao.
Exactly. A campaign that probably lasted months, involved sieges, battles, starvation, disease, and then ended with the capture and, yes, likely execution of the main surrendered Zhao army. It represents the moment when the warring states probably understood what total war really meant in practice.
And crucially, this total war wasn't just devastating for the losers, right? It came at a massive cost for the winners, too.
That's absolutely key to understanding the scale. To really believe Zhao could lose 400,000, you need to see the impact on the supposedly victorious Qin State. They won, but it nearly broke them.
And we have evidence of that from the Qin side.
We do. Powerful evidence, actually, from the winning general himself, the famous Bai Qi. After Changping, the Qin king, King Zhaoxiang, ordered Bai Qi to press the advantage to lead another campaign immediately against the Zhao capital city, Handan.
Makes sense strategically. Kick them all they're down.
You'd think. But Bai Qi flat out refused the command. Vehemently.
Refused the king. Why?
His reasoning was stark. He argued that yes, Qin had won the battle, but the price was absolutely devastating. His reported words were that Qin's soldiers had died by more than half and the state was left empty of people.
Died by more than half. The winning side lost over half its army.
That's what the commander claimed. And that phrase, the state was left empty of people. It uses a specific term, guozhu menji. It means the state, the country, was literally empty and the people were starving. Resources totally depleted.
Wow. Okay, that level of internal devastation on the Qin side, that actually makes the scale of the Zhao losses, the 400,000, seem more plausible. It suggests a true meat grinder, a war of mutual annihilation.
Precisely. Other records from the time, like the collection called the Zhang, they support this picture. Qin won Changping, yes. But the cost was so immense, it crippled their ability to immediately follow up. It wasn't like a clean ancient victory. It was more like the Somme or Verdun in World War I, a catastrophic drain that consumed a huge chunk of the fighting-age men of both nations.
So we've got this unprecedented scale of warfare, fueled by this unique socio-economic system. But it still begs that original question. Why Qin? If the weapons were similar, if farming techniques were roughly comparable across the big states, how did Qin consistently manage to inflict these disproportionate losses on everyone else?
It really comes down to, I think, one of the biggest blind spots we often have when looking at history or even modern situations.
Right.
We underestimate the raw power of systemic change.
You focus too much on the hardware, the tech.
Exactly. Who's got the slightly better sword, the new chariot design, whatever. But Qin's advantage wasn't really hardware. It was their social and political software. A system just ruthlessly optimized to mobilize and expend human capital for war.
That's a critical distinction. Can you give us maybe a more modern parallel, where a change in the system itself, without new tech, just immediately transformed things?
Sure. Think about China in the late 1970s. Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening up. Before that, you had the collective commune system for agriculture. Productivity was, well, not great, despite having access to tractors and fertilizer and so on.
Right.
Then, famously, one village, Shang, secretly tries out the household responsibility system. Basically, they divide the land among families, and crucially, families get to keep whatever they produce above a certain quota.
They changed the incentive, the distribution model, not the plows.
Precisely. And Deng Xiaoping himself later pointed to places like Fujian County where they adopted the system, and he said something like, they turned it all around in 1 year, completely changed their situation. Agricultural output just exploded. Why? Purely systemic change, unleashing direct personal economic incentive on a massive scale.
That sounds exactly like Shang Yang's reforms just 2,000 years earlier. He didn't invent gunpowder. He invented a new kind of citizen, motivated in a new way.
Absolutely. Or think about the rise of Rome, another great example.
Oh.
Rome's early enemies, the Greeks in southern Italy, the Etruscans, Hannibal's Carthaginians, they often had more wealth, maybe better naval tech, more sophisticated tactics sometimes.
But Rome kept winning in the long run.
Why? Because Rome's unbeatable strength was its political and military system.
What aspects specifically parallel Qin?
Well, you had the flexible legion structure, yes, but more fundamentally, you had the citizen-soldier framework, where military service was tied directly to citizenship and land rights. And crucially, Rome had this unique political ability, unlike many others, to absorb defeated peoples, to turn enemies into allies or even citizens, constantly replenishing their manpower pool.
That resilience, that ability to bounce back, like after Cannae.
Cannae is the perfect example. Hannibal inflicted one of the most catastrophic defeats in military history on Rome. Tens of thousands killed in a single day. It would have shattered most ancient states. But Rome absorbed the blow, raised new legions, and kept fighting. Why? Because their system of mobilization and regeneration didn't break.
So the enemy general might win the battle.
But Rome's system won the war. And Qin's farming and warfare incentive structure, that Gong system, was their equivalent. It was their great structural advantage, a system built for ruthless, relentless, and self-replenishing conquest. It ensured that the maximum possible resources of the state, especially human resources, were always dedicated to the military effort.
Which brings us to maybe the final big logistical puzzle, the one that must have kept rival kings up at night. How could Qin afford this sustained massive rate of attrition? If they really lost over half their army at Changping, how did they just keep finding more soldiers year after year?
Yeah, where did all the bodies come from? You have to step back and look at the basic demographic reality of the pre-industrial world. It's grim, but simple.
High birth rates, high death rates.
Exactly. These societies were basically defined by a very high birth rate, constantly battling against an equally high death rate from disease, famine, accidents, and of course, near constant warfare. This creates a kind of, well, a self-regenerating mechanism for populations, including armies.
And do we have any clues about how many kids people were having back then?
We do get hints from texts like the Han Feizi. It was written during that period, and it suggests that it wasn't uncommon for a couple to successfully raise, say, 5 children to adulthood.
5 surviving kids per couple. That's a pretty high replacement rate.
It's substantial, yeah. In a world where people generally married young, started families early, the potential for population growth was significant, even with constant wars bleeding off young men.
So even if a disaster like Changping wipes out a huge chunk of a generation, the high birth rate means the next cohort is already coming up behind them. It's a horrible thought, but it makes logistical sense.
It's a tragic kind of engine, but yes.
Yeah.
The remaining population, combined with that baseline birth rate, could replenish the losses relatively quickly, maybe within a generation or so. And there's another factor, too, climate. We think the Warring States period generally experienced a relatively warmer and wetter climate cycle compared to other times.
Which means better harvests.
Better grain yields, yeah. More food can support a larger base population. A larger population pool means more potential recruits to feed into the war machine, helping to offset those massive battlefield losses.
So it's this brutal, almost simple equation. The system Shang built made them willing to kill and die at unprecedented rates.
Driven by those personal incentives, yeah.
And the underlying demographic reality, plus maybe favorable climate, ensured they always had a fresh supply of young men ready to join that system, seeking rank and land through the commission structure, a constantly regenerating human resource pool for the meat grinder.
You can even look at, say, pre-industrial Europe after the Black Death wiped out a third or more of the population. Huge catastrophe. But what happened? High birth rates quickly kicked in, and population started growing again surprisingly fast, despite ongoing wars and plagues. The social structure almost demanded high birth rates to survive high death rates. Qin just channeled that fundamental demographic energy into this perfectly engineered machine of state-sponsored violence.
So the real genius of Qin, the terrifying genius, it wasn't metallurgy, it was social engineering. They created a perpetual motion machine of war, powered by basic human ambition and demographic maths. So we started out asking how a state with bronze and iron swords could rack up body counts that sound almost modern. And this deep dive, it really suggested Qin's horrifying military records. They were probably disturbingly accurate.
Yeah, because they weren't just propaganda points. They were tied directly to this incredibly strict, state-guaranteed, audited commission system. The heads were currency.
The real takeaway, then, it feels like, is that the Qin State wasn't just good at war. They engineered a perfect machine for conquest, a system designed with laser focus on one single objective, killing efficiently for personal profit.
And that machine, it wasn't primarily driven by abstract ideas like patriotism or loyalty, though those might have played a role. It ran on the most immediate, personal, transactional, and frankly, ruthless incentives imaginable.
Which leaves us with a pretty chilling thought, doesn't it? If a system is perfectly designed to achieve a single horrifying goal in this case, mass killing and conquest, does its incredible success prove the genius of the design? Or does it just expose something darker? About human adaptability, maybe? About how easily we can be incentivized towards terrible ends?
That's absolutely the question to ponder, I think, because you see systems today, right? In business, in politics, online. Systems brilliantly designed to maximize one specific metric engagement. Profit, votes sometimes with little regard for the collateral damage or the human cost. Qin is this ancient, stark reminder that the design of the system itself, maybe even more than the technology it uses, is what truly dictates the outcome.
A powerful reminder indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Qin's bloody but undeniably effective system of conquest. We hope it gives you something to think about the power and the potential danger of system design in our own world. If you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.